Hello, hello. I'm very pleased to have Mr. Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst and deputy director of the Department of Counterterrorism of Defense Force in United States. Hello, Mr. Johnson.
Doctor, good to be with you. Thank you for the kind invitation.
I'm very honored to be with you. I think it's the first time when you have a show with TV from Romania.
Yeah, yes. My goal is that I get interviewed and then I find out a reason to go to Romania and visit. So I've heard it's a beautiful country.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Larry Johnson, very big events are happening. It seems that the tension are escalating, and it is as a mathematical probability that a big war, maybe a world war, could be inflicted. And we see the growing tensions in Ukraine. NATO countries are preparing for a nuclear war. They officially repeating this that they have to stop Russia. They cannot accept Russia to win in Ukraine. And also we see that Israel is preparing to attack Lebanon. The Houthi just attacked with big success some American ships, and there are tensions in South China Sea. We see that Philippines are used, it seems, as a proxy against, against China. United States is using. It's a paradoxical situation that you, as American analyst, you have this courage to show the mistakes. I can say that this deep state in United States is doing in this foreign politics. So let's start with Ukraine. We saw that 2 days ago it was a shelling on a beach in Crimea at Sevastopol, and civilians were killed. 5 bombs guided by the American operators were sent to this region. 4 of them has been neutralized by the Russian defense system, but one of these missiles, I think the name is Atakams,
yes,
reached to touch the Russian beach and killed civilians. So what is this, Mr. Johnson? I mean, in my opinion, this seems to be a terrorist attack. It is not a war between armies when American missiles attack, of course, with the involvement of the Ukrainians, attack civilians in Russia, in Crimea.
Well, in a way, it's a little reminiscent of World War II. If you recall, well, I know neither you or I were alive, so we're not going to recall. But as we've read and can reconstruct events, the United States and the United Kingdom embarked on an aerial campaign that really targeted the civilians of Germany. And they were justifying it as a military target because the people of Germany supported the government of Adolf Hitler. But really, it was a war crime, in my view, because we're killing civilians, even if those civilians are going to work in a defense plan. They are not armed, they're not direct combatants, and they become, they're not a proper target, I guess is what I'm struggling to say. So what happened on Sunday needs to be viewed in the context of the statements in the preceding 3 weeks. If you recall, on June 3rd, Vladimir Putin made some very strong remarks that were then followed up by both Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. And they made it very clear that the U.S. and West and NATO supplying weapons, particularly missiles, to Ukraine that were going to be used to strike inside Russia was crossing a red line. That going forward, Russia would view that as an attack on Russia by those foreign powers, which, from the Russian standpoint, I don't think they were just talking to be talking. They were sending a very clear message of warning to the United States and NATO that if you do this, this will escalate. Not runs the risk of escalation. They made it clear this will escalate. We will respond. You will pay a price. I don't believe the Russians are a bunch of, the expression in English is blowhards. People who talk but never act on what they talk about. To the contrary, Russia is very direct. So this attack with these 5 attacker missiles is true. 4 were shot down. It is unclear whether the 5th one was hit and then deviated and then detonated, or if it actually was the target. Regardless, when that rocket or that missile goes off, it's carrying what are called cluster bombs. So it's got think of it like a grapevine. You got all these grapes hanging off the vine. So the vine in this case is the missile itself. Then the casing comes off, and all those grapes fall off, and each one explodes. Which is why the video that was published, you can hear pop, 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 going off. That has been outlawed. Now, you've got to sign on to the conventions to agree to outlaw it, but the United States, up to this point, has rejected that. But it really is, it's viewed as an illegal, inhumane weapon, primarily because those things, they look like big grapes. When they fall off, they don't explode. A child can come along and say, oh my God, a ball, I'm going to play with a ball. And they pick it up and they blow off their hands or it kills them. So it was quickly denounced through the United Nations as this is an illegal weapon. This should not be out there because it doesn't really accomplish a specific military purpose and has great potential to kill children. That missile, though, to target it requires intelligence. So, geographic coordinates that are, captured by U.S. drones or U.S. fixed-wing aircraft like the Rivet Joint, which is the specific plane for the plane enthusiasts is a KC-135, or the Predator drone, which is a Predator 4, a Global Hawk. And if the information is transferred down to a station that's controlled by U.S. intelligence, not by Ukrainians, and it's the U.S. intelligence officials then package the information up, pass it to the Ukrainians. Well, this is the missile comes from the United States. The intelligence used to target it comes from the United States. The only thing the United States didn't do was actually press the button to launch the missile. That was done by Ukraine. Well, I don't know what Romanian law is, but in the United States, if you buy the weapon and you provide the information for the person to carry out the attack, and that person commits murder, you're guilty of murder as well. You facilitated murder. You enabled it. And the Russians have reacted at this point with strong emotion and words of condemnation. There is a disagreement in what I call the punditry community. Alexander Mercouris, for example, who I have enormous respect for. Alex is a great analyst. He thinks that if the Russians did something like go out and bring down a global hawk, shoot down a predator, that would necessarily escalate. He may be right, but I have a different take on it. When you listen to what Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, said, and what Vladimir Putin said, they made it very clear that if, to the United States, if you do this, there will be a price to be paid, and we will respond. I don't believe that means that the Russians are going to say, oh, we're really mad, so now we're going to write you a mean letter. No. I think it's going to mean military action. I think at a minimum it means that Russia, whether they announce an official no-fly zone over the western part of the Black Sea or an official one, they're going to start shooting down, at a minimum, Predator drones, any of Global Hawks, any of the collection platforms that are unmanned that come into the Pacific, they'll shoot those down. They may go as far as to give a warning to the United States that if you bring any manned aircraft in, they will be shot down too. They probably warn in advance on that. But this also raises an issue for Romania, because Romania is providing air bases for NATO that's carrying out attacks. If one of these attacks is so severe and causes really massive civilian damage, I cannot rule out the possibility that Russia would target Romanian airfields. Then we're looking at this thing escalating into a major war.
Yes, as you very well underlined, this attack has been inflicted with the participation of United States, because these missiles could not be launched without the permission of the American operators. And with this attack, United States is actually part of the war. I mean, it's not a proxy war anymore. United States is already, and the Russians, they perceived, it's obvious now, it's on view. It's not hide anymore. We all know that United States provoked Russia, but now the situation is very direct. Another aspect that we need to mention is that 2 days ago it was a very important Christian celebration.
Right.
We call it here in Romania Rusali. I don't know the word in English, but however, the name doesn't matter. What is important, it was a Christian celebration. How can you attack Ukrainian? I mean, and when they are also Orthodox Christian, they know very well the significance of this day, and still they attack civilian, children, women. They
Right.
had no guilty on that. So the purpose of this attack is not a strategic one. For a military point of view, it has no significance. The only purpose is to inflict terror on people in Crimea. They are afraid to go on holidays now because they expect, any moment to be shelled by Ukrainians. But this is the name of terrorism.
Right. I've spent most of my career now, almost over 40 years, working on issues related to terrorism. And the one thing I've learned, and in particular as I've gone back and read about what they call the operations of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, during World War II, and the British Special Operations Executive, the SOE, they get a lot of attention in media, movies in Hollywood. They tend to exaggerate their capabilities and certainly exaggerate the effect. Terrorist attacks in general are a sign of weakness, number one. They're a sign of desperation. And frankly, I cannot build you a case where terrorism succeeded in accomplishing anything that would, such as replacing a government and bringing in a better government or a new government. Because usually what the terrorist activities elicit a response from the state power. And usually it's a very devastating response that winds up destroying the terrorists. And, you look at what happened with 9/11 attacks, that led to this U.S. global war on terror, which, has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not more. And really, it accomplished little. So these attacks, though, are predicated in the belief, because I do believe that they were funded by or encouraged by Central Intelligence Agency and or British intelligence, one of the two, if not both. And they're operating on this premise that, excuse me, if we create enough chaos, if we cause death and destruction, that's going to weaken support for Vladimir Putin, and that'll make it easier to overthrow his government. Well, that is, that assumes that if you get rid of Putin, you're going to get Mahatma Gandhi as president, or, Mother Teresa, or Jesus Christ. So, it's foolish. The odds are that if Putin was somehow ousted, the replacement for Putin would be more likely to use nuclear weapons and to immediately go on the offensive against the West in a way that Vladimir Putin is not. I believe Putin has been wise in his prudence. So this notion that this terrorism is going to cause such unrest that it will turn the people against Putin, I think it just has the opposite effect. It builds support for Putin because the people feel, hey, we're being attacked by these outsiders. And, one of the remarkable things about Russia, I don't know if this applies to Romania, but there is not the level of sectarian conflict that you see in many countries where you have multiple religious. Take India, for example. India's, got a big rift between the Muslims and the Hindus, as just one example. But up to this point, Russia has found a balance with it's predominantly Christian country, but accepts and embraces Islam, accepts and embraces Judaism. In fact, if I recall correctly, Vladimir Putin, shortly after he assumed the presidency back in 2000, one of his first acts was to allow Jewish butchers to do kosher butchering that previously had been outlawed under the Soviet rules. So, but my point is, there is a harmony, the genuine harmony that exists between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in Russia that I think would be an absolute guide for how others should conduct. And that's sort of what this attack in Dagestan against God and the Orthodox Church, slitting of the priest's throat, these are designed to try to promote that kind of strife. And I don't think the Russians will take the bait.
Yes, I just wanted to mention about this second attack in Dagestan. So the same pattern, terrorist attacks with no military strategic value. It's just to inflict terror. So this shows the weakness of the armies of NATO, because they are not able to defeat the Russian army, and with this allowing to send missiles deeper in the territory of Russia, this is what they are doing, terrorist attacks. because they are not able to do more. And
Right.
Mr. Johnson, here in Romania, we are not a free country. I mean, the political leadership is confiscated since 1989, 34 years ago. It was a coup d'etat. The president since 1989, it was Nicolae Ceausescu, and he was a real patriot. Many
Yeah.
of the buildings here in Romania are built on that period. Since then, everything has been destroyed. Our industry, agriculture, education, health, everything has been destroyed. And since 1989, Romania became a colony of the West. And with the so-called privatization, everything we had, property of the people, has been um, considered property of the state. It was a shift, a very smart shift. And who is the state is the new leadership, the old security. And the narrative in Romania nowadays is that Russia attacked Ukraine without any reason. It was a brutal attack 2 years ago, and the Russians want to expand their territories, and they just want to kill Ukrainians, to conquer some other countries, not only Ukraine. And our mainstream media says, be aware, Russia wants to come in Romania, in Poland, in Hungary, everywhere in Europe. And if we don't stop Russia, they are going to come over us. And now I want to ask you, from your point of view, for our Romanian audience, which is the nature of this conflict on the territory of Ukraine? Who is fighting who and for what reason? In a very short explanation.
Yeah. This was a NATO provocation. In 2014, there was this tug of war. In fact, it goes back to 2014. In 2007, Vladimir Putin warned NATO, because Putin was attending NATO conferences at the time, not to make Ukraine and Georgia part of NATO, and NATO insisted that they were going to do that in spite of warnings from Russia. And despite having a Democratic president say, "Oh, well, he was corrupt." Well, look, Joe Biden's corrupt. Okay, so let's stop with this nonsense that, if so and so is corrupted, therefore they're an illegitimate president. I mean, if that's standard, then the United States can't have a president right now either.
So what can we say about Hunter Biden with his Burisma affairs in Ukraine?
Well,
so
the Burisma, the cocaine, the illegal drug. I mean, the guy's he's a one-man crime spree. So, and that's what the irony now is. You know how it is as a Romanian, where the U.S. comes and lectures you guys on, you need to, you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong and you need to clean this up. And, at this point, it's like having a meddlesome mother-in-law who's addicted to crack. All right? You want to just tell her to shut up, go mind your own business, leave us alone. And increasingly, the world's come to that. But that's what happened. What happened in 2014 was the United States and the United Kingdom collaborated and pulling off a coup, included bringing in members of the Azov battalion dressed up as security forces for the Ukrainian government and then shooting Ukrainian citizens. So they created that immediate division. They then subsequently launched the attack on the Donbass against the most, let's call it Russified, the most heavily Russian-influenced region in the country. And, they got stopped. The militias there, when they had backing support from the Russians for sure, the Russians didn't have troops on the ground. So this all, again, goes back to when the Soviet Union broke up and history we now look back on this as part of history because it's over, 33 years ago. What an opportunity. The West could have embraced Russia. They could have said, let us help you rebuild your country. Instead, the West lined up like a bunch of rapists, and they went into Russia and found Russians that they could align with to seize the economy, seize gold, seize uranium, seize oil, seize natural gas, seize aluminum, seize down the list. I mean, Russia was like a treasure house, and the West went into rape. And that's strong language, but I mean it exactly as I say it. This was a forcible attack to destroy Russia. And then Putin shows up and puts a stop to it. And that's the root of the anger at Vladimir Putin. He's like that parent that calls the police to stop teenagers from having a party where they're all drunk and having sex, and the police show up and put a stop to it. And the kids, they're mad at the parent. Well, that's why they're mad at Vladimir Putin. He put a stop to that. And, the sense he's been barked upon telling these oligarchs, make your money. You can be a billionaire, but by God, you're going to invest it in this country. You're going to help build this country up. You're not going to be exporting your money overseas that you take from these people and do it and put it elsewhere. No. As we're saying in the South in America, that dog don't hunt. Not going to let that happen. So, that's the reality behind this. Anybody that wants to argue that this was just an unprovoked Russian attack, they're an imbecile. They're lacking in mental intelligence. And if they can't understand with the reasoned discussion what I've just explained, save your breath. You might as well go talk to a stone wall, because they've convinced themselves that Russia's the bad guy, no matter what Russia does.
Yeah, I think it's worth to mention that the eastern part of Ukraine, with the Russian ethnic Ukrainians, they were not agree to make Ukraine part of the European Union and NATO. So after the coup d'etat in 2014, when the Kiev regime, the new Kiev regime after the coup d'etat, saw that they cannot deal with these Ukrainians that were actually Russians, they started to shell them. Wow. And there were these Minsk agreements that the Western part did not respect. Angela Merkel, François Hollande, and the Ukrainian presidents. And we saw what happened, but in mainstream media, in Euro-Atlantic space, those aspects are not mentioned. Yeah. I mean, they just elude them.
They get in the way of the story, They'll say, don't confuse us with the facts. We prefer our fantasy.
Yes, indeed. And I wanted to say something else about Romania for our audience in worldwide. Even if the leadership of Romania has been confiscated for 34 years, the people is not stupid. I mean, we understand the truth, and most of the Romanians are sympathetic with the Russians. I mean, yes, we had a bad history with Russia, with the Bolsheviks, for instance.
Right.
We had some prisons, and our most patriots people has been killed there with thousands, and some people still consider that these prisons were made by Russians, but no, they were made by Bolsheviks. The Bolshevik revolution in Russia has not been made by Russians, has been made by foreigners, by Khazars, by Jews. But we are not allowed to talk about this. It's a very delicate subject.
Yeah, no, it's a complicated history. the West, like in my own country, perhaps like Romania, we like to present this story of monolithic communism and that Joseph Stalin was going to conquer the world, that from the outset, that was what he wanted. And it's like, when you look at the end of World War II, they said, well, the proof is that Stalin took over Romania, took over Czechoslovakia, took over Poland, took over Bulgaria, took over Hungary. See, that proves it. Well, what they leave out of the story, and this is that I'm not trying to besmirch Romanians, but the fact was Romanians fought on the side of Hitler in World War II. It was Romanians who were, at the beginning. And they ultimately they switched. But if you're looking from the standpoint of Russia or the then Soviet Union, you've been at the end of 1945, you look back and say, okay, we've been attacked from the West in 1941. We've been attacked from the West in 1917. We've been attacked from the West in 1854, the Crimea War. And we've been attacked by, the French in 1812. We got them on our western flank, and we're going to create a buffer zone that will protect our country. Because we just lost 7 million. Now, people say, that's fun. Well, I think that was the primary motivation behind that. And, was it the Soviets imposed a brutal regime? But what's interesting is during that whole period, 1955, that the Soviets still had control over Austria and Vienna, and they negotiated a deal with the Austrians. Hey, you agree to be neutral, we'll pull out. And the Austrians said, deal, done. The Soviets pulled out. So that right there destroys this myth that the Soviets were bent on conquering the world and wouldn't give up any territory. But I think that you raise a really important point, that the people of Romania, the majority, they don't want war, they want peace. And there is absolutely no reason why you can't get along with Russia, particularly now. Russia's not pushing a communist regime. They're not talking about locking up priests. It is a new Russia. And people want to focus on, they've got crime, they've got these wealthy oligarchs. Well, what in the hell do you think we have in the United States? Let me introduce you to Bill Gates, Elon Musk. We'll go down the list. We got Bill Ackman at Pershing Square. I mean, and we got, and let's be honest about it, the vast majority of them are Jewish, which further feeds into this meme that, the Jews are controlling the world kind of thing. So this, my attitude is every country ought to mind its own business, take care of its own affairs. And then when you interact with other countries, treat them like you want to be treated. See if that can become a basis for foreign policy, instead of looking at the others, saying, what can I do to screw them out of their resources? What can I do to rob them of their resources? What can I do to take control of their government? What can I do to submit, put them under my foot? That's unfortunately what the current approach to foreign affairs is.
Indeed. But it's almost the same pattern everywhere. But in order to clarify what you mentioned before about Romania, that we were attacking Russia shoulder by shoulder with the Germans. So we were forced to do this because Basarabia, this is the Moldavian part of Romania in eastern, has been annexed by Russia in 1940. And we wanted to make our brothers free to come again to the motherland. And we wanted to free this territory. But we could not stop saying, okay, Germany, we don't want to fight anymore. You become our enemy if you want to fight Russia. So it was a very, very complicated situation. We have another part of Romania, Transylvania, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, after the Diktat of Vienna, they wanted to annex again Transylvania. Even Transylvania is for thousands of years part of our ancestors.
Right.
And we did not know what to do, what part of Romania to abandon. So it was very, very hard. And then one of the leaders of Romania on that period, Ion Antonescu, he tried to help the Jews to go in other parts. And in 2011, Shimon Peres, the first minister of Israel, came to Romania, and in a public speech, he said, "We thank to Romania because you helped 400,000 Israelis to go to escape from the Holocaust."
Right.
But
right.
few years ago, few years after, the narrative changed, and the Israelis started to say that Romanians killed 400,000 Israelis, and now we have to pay for Holocaust. I don't want to comment anymore because we have laws here that
Yeah.
are punishing us, but you know how things are. Okay,
Could I just
in order to
could I just say what you highlight is that, you know what, it's not fair to blame the children for the acts of their parents or their grandparents. I think it's important to, as you correctly note, to understand the actions of parents, grandparents, of our ancestors, what they did, why they did it. They may, because there's always a context to this. It's like they were just evil and decided they're going to get up and do, this. The truth sometimes gets very complicated. And that's one thing that we do we need to understand the past, but not become hostage to the past. That's what I think is sort of what you're talking about.
Yes, and I think it is also important to understand that the current Russia is not the same Russia until Putin, because
Yeah.
before Putin, with Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin, Russia was in a great manner a proxy of United States, of the globalists. But Putin came with a kind of revolution, and the patriots took control, but in a very diplomatic manner, and they succeeded to make Russia free again. Not completely. They were part of this pandemic, for instance. Even now, these days, they are not completely free of their past with the Bolsheviks. We know that the corpse of Lenin is still in Moscow, and they at their metros they have all kind of paintings with the communists. They were so big, so nice, so great, and this shift is very slow because people in Russia are not prepared to understand this difference between Bolsheviks and Russians. But let's come back to the actuality. We see that the discourse of the leaders of NATO is more and more aggressive. They are talking about nuclear attacks on Russia as the only way to stop Russia. So we see that in Poland, they built huge NATO bases. In Romania, they are preparing a base, Mihail Cogălnicianu. And this basis that they are building here in Romania is the biggest in Europe, even bigger than Ramstein in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to enter in a open war with Russia? I mean, Romania, Poland, NATO.
Well, Romania has already made itself a target. So you are going to be one of the first ones hit in the event that this does escalate. And you could get hit with conventional weapons, not just nuclear. The fact that you and Poland, and when I say Ukraine, Romania, I'm not specifically putting it on you. I realize they didn't consult you and say, Dr. Calistrat says, should we bring in our Aegis missile system, which is capable of carrying nuclear warheads? And you would have said, no, that's crazy. But that's what has happened, that there are a missile battery system that is the Aegis air defense system that's been put in both Romania and Poland that it is nuclear capable. And so that's going to be one of the very first targets that Russia would go after, because they can't afford to believe that, that they'll never fire it, they'll never use that. I have to tell you, so I think I'm a bit older than you by, at least a decade. I'm coming in on 70 years of age. And in my lifetime, I've never seen a time that is this dangerous, this fraught with peril. Because it'd be one thing if we were just talking about Ukraine, okay? But as you noted in your opening remarks, when you factor in the war that's going on underway between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and then what the Houthis are doing, and then Iran and the West talk about attacking Iran, and then the attacks in China, all of a sudden, war fever has taken over the West. And I've made, this is a very cynical view, but why is the United States leading in that? Because in our experience, with all the wars we've been involved with, from World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, going into Syria and Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and on down the list, it's been very profitable for the United States. And the United States has paid virtually no price in terms of the loss of human life. The World War II occupies this it's a very great iconic theme in, Hollywood movies in particular. And boy, you watch the Hollywood version of World War II, you think the United States by itself fought and defeated the Nazis, without recognizing that it was the Soviet Union that fought 80% of the Nazi army, for starters. But even in that war, in the European theater alone, the United States only lost about 260,000 soldiers. Now, I don't want to say that that's inconsequential. Truly, it was a tragedy for the families that lost a loved one. But when you compare that loss of life of 260,000 to the fact that the Soviets in the Battle of Stalingrad lost 800,000 soldiers in just that battle. So the Russian people paid an enormous price in terms of loss of human life that the United States never paid, which is why to this day the United States agitates with these wars, because all wars do is send more money into the military-industrial complex. Lockheed Martin gets richer, General Dynamics gets richer, Raytheon gets richer, run down the list. And in the United States, the shareholders of those corporations, they get more wealthy. That's one. I think that's a very cynical explanation, but I think that's one of the major factors that's driving this. It's profitable for us. We've never paid any price because the United States hasn't been attacked physically since 1812.
In my opinion, United States is used in the same manner, but at a bigger scale as Romania. I mean, the citizens, they don't agree with the foreign politics of the United States. For instance, I don't think that the American citizens they agree to attacking all kind of countries like Iraq, like Syria, like Yugoslavia. They want peace, but after the 9/11 coup d'etat and with this inside job that happened as a terrorist attack, um, it was that group of PNAS Project for New American
Yeah,
Century
right.
that
PNAC.
the neoconservators they took control of America and they started to conquer the world as war on terrorism and United States became like an armed force of the globalists.
Hmm.
United States is not controlled by the American citizens, is controlled by these psychopaths, in my opinion. And I'm curious to know your opinion.
I no, I agree with you. So I know some of those psychopaths. I mean, I know Paul Wolfowitz. Um, his son and my son went to the same high school the same year, and so at some football games, there were a couple of times when I was sitting next to Paul and talking to him. Let me ask you a quick question: how many Romanians died in World War II? Do you know offhand? Because I don't.
Well, I cannot tell you exactly, but maybe 1 million, I don't know, something like this.
Okay, so but again, put that into context. Romania is a much smaller country than the United States was, back then, and yet suffered far more casualties. Again, I argue goes back to this thing of another reason why, if you go out and survey the Romanian public, hey, you want to go to war with Russia? I bet you they're going, no, are you crazy? There's no need. The tendency to think, oh yeah, we have to go to war because invariably it's not the children of the leadership, the wealthy, the powerful that go to war. It's the children of the middle class and the poor. They're the ones who are used as cannon fodder in this. So, I think these needless provocations of Russia, I think are going to result in escalation of the war. That's why when we talked at the outset about what Putin and Lavrov have said of late, I don't think they have any choice now but to respond militarily against the West. They're not going to do diplomatic action. They're not going to do economic action. I think they're going to do military action because otherwise, uh, with the strength of the statements about that there will be a price to be paid, if they don't do it, it's going to make them look weak, and it's going to make people not believe their words in the future. So, in a way, they've sort of painted themselves into a corner with that language use. But I think they sat down and waited in advance what they were going to say and why.
Uh, I want to ask you something. This is not a main subject, but we are in a point of our discussion that is proper. Um, I saw a video with General 4 Stars Wesley Clark saying that after the 9/11 attack, he has been in Pentagon, and he
Yeah,
remembered that 10 years ago he has been also in Pentagon and he talked with Paul Wolfowitz and Paul told him that we are going to attack Middle East and he was very confused. Why shall we attack Middle East? And he said, Paul Wolfowitz, that we need to expand our influence there because otherwise, Russia, when they will recover after the dismantle of Soviet Union, they will expand their influence, and we have to be the first there. So it was a plan, and the 9/11 attack was just a pretext to start the concrete actions in Middle East and to conquer the territory after with this narrative of fighting terrorism. So
yeah.
Wesley Clark said about Iraq, Iran, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and there were 7 countries, and exactly this was the plan. In 2015, Russia recovered their power. They regained their super military power, and they stopped this offensive of United States in Middle East, and they saved Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
Right. It was part of that was the Russian reaction to the Maidan coup in 2014. So that they, in a way, it was sort of payback, but it was payback justified because they were invited in by Syria. You know, without getting into, because when you open the whole subject of 9/11, those who argue that all this was planned with the West or with the Israelis, and all I know is I held top secret clearances back then, and I had access to classified information, and I was aware of what was going on and what was not going on. I know for a fact that when the Bush administration took over, came into office, Richard Clark had prepared a lengthy paper detailing what the Bush administration needed to do after the, what we now know as ISIS, then was Al Qaeda, and his recommendations were rejected. There's a whole bureaucratic process, what was called an interagency meeting on terrorism, where you have the representatives from the state, from the Department of Defense, from the CIA, from the National Security Agency, from Defense Intelligence Agency, from FBI. They would meet monthly at the National Security Council, or were supposed to meet monthly. Bush administration stopped that. They didn't hold their first meeting of that group until September 10th of 2001. And during that entire leading up to the 9/11 attacks, the Bush administration was obsessed with doing missile defense. They wanted to do missile defense, which is one of the reasons they then informed the Russians, hey, we're going to withdraw from this anti-ballistic missile treaty. Once 9/11 happened, it was, as you correctly stated, seized on as a pretext. It then shifted the entire narrative for the Bush administration. They were going to bring democracy to the world. And that's when they embarked on this new campaign of, I call it was an imperial, another stroke, act of imperialism, colonialism. First you attack Afghanistan. And then instead of, very well-defined objectives, hey, we're trying to eliminate Al-Qaeda, now you try to take over the whole country. And that's a 20-year fiasco. You attack Iraq. And in the process, you kill 800, 900,000 Iraqi civilians. I always challenge anybody that wants to start detailing, say, Vladimir Putin's a bad guy because he's believed to have been involved with killing 9 people. I go, 9 people? Wow. Man, he's a failure compared to George W. Bush. Bush killed 800,000 in Iraq at his orders. Now they say, well, Bush didn't directly order somebody to kill him. Bush gave the military the power to do it. They went out and carried it out. He's responsible. Same for Barack Obama. So, like I said, when we step back and look at what the United States has done in the last 23 years, it's a horror show. We are out of control. We've got to fight everybody. If we can't fight you, we're going to run a color revolution. We're going to undermine your government with covert activities, or we're going to put sanctions on you. And I think we've reached a breaking point with respect to countries, even like Romania. The number of countries that are starting to join BRICS, they're telling the West, basta, enough, no more. We're going to, and they're finding in Russia and China a new economic world order that's not under the control of the West.
Yes, very important everything you said. In order to see a general view, I think it's worth to to see that United States actually not it's not very good this formula United States the globalists that are controlling United States the globalists they
Yeah.
attacked the area called Rimland in the theory of geopolitics Arthur Mackinder and they are very much afraid that the unipolar system is going to multipolar system and they
Hmm.
don't want to lose control because they were saying about the globalization everything will be controlled by
Yeah.
America
Well,
meaning the globalists and now with the rise of power of Russia and China they can see that the international system is transforming in something else in multipolarity
yeah.
in multipolarity
Yeah. Well, this was
yes
a self-inflicted wound by the West. Um, when they decided to impose the economic sanctions on Russia after the start of the special military operation, and particularly said, okay, we're going to cut you off from SWIFT. So SWIFT is basically it's a email system for banks where they can send information back and forth with each other for wiring money from one account to another. By taking Russia out of that, they thought that this will eliminate Russia's ability to do international commerce. Forget for a moment the fact that the United States is still dependent on Russia to buy uranium, for example, and that Europe was dependent upon Russia for oil and gas. So that was foolish from the outset. Uh, but I prefer the term multinodal, N-O, node as in N-O-D-E, as a polar. Polar implies, two ends. You got the north end and south. But multinodal is what we've gone from this one node, which was the U.S.-based international rule order, or the international rules-based order, I guess is the terminology, where the dollar is the controlling power. And that if you wanted to do anything with international commerce on any front, you had to have dollars. So the demand for dollars was there, and as a result, U.S. Treasury could issue more, print more money, issue more T-bills. People would buy them up. So we basically fooled the rest of the world into funding our wars against them. Think about that. And now with this failed attempt to isolate Russia, and then Russia's new union with China and the strengthening of BRICS, the world is now set on a new path where the dollar is not going to dominate control. And I got to tell you, I think most people in the United States have not come to grips with that. They don't realize what's happening, and they're not going to wake up to it until it's too late. Not that I'm suggesting they should wake up and do something different, but the era of the United States being able to bully the rest of the world, to impose sanctions on North Korea that led to North Koreans starving, to impose sanctions on Iran, to impose sanctions on Cuba. That's starting to lift now. Yeah, they got the sanctions there, but now they got alternatives. Russia and China are basically telling the West, screw you. We're going to pursue our own interests, regardless of what you say. In fact, we view you now as an enemy. You're not a friend. You're a foe.
it seems that the recent visit of Vladimir Putin in Vietnam is very much connected with what you just said. I mean, Vietnam come to the part of BRICS, and even Vietnam has some issues with China. They are aware that United States, I mean globalists, they were a bigger enemy, and that's why it seems that Vietnam is more open to make deals with Russia and China than with the United States.
why not? Let's start for the fact that, I don't think the Vietnamese have Alzheimer's disease. They haven't lost their memory. And they remember it was the United States that killed more than 1 million Vietnamese in their efforts to find freedom. And, the United States policy towards them was racist. We called them gooks, slants, slopes. Didn't respect them as human beings. And I think they remember that. It was Russia, not China. It was Russia that supplied the Vietnamese with critical weapon support to help defeat the United States. So, and now the United States is going over again. We're trying to bully Vietnam into staying on our side. That's why our country. I am thoroughly disgusted with the conduct of the leaders of this country of America. I'm a patriot. I love the concept of my country, what it stands for in terms of it's supposed to be freedom of press and freedom of speech and liberty. But what we've become is just a nation of bullies. And what we're doing to other countries is incomprehensible. And now we're surprised when they push back. Gee, it's like you go over and you encroach on your neighbor's yard and they tell you to get the hell off. And you're like, hey, where did that come from? Well, it's because you were where you weren't supposed to be.
Yes. Let's move to the Middle East region. And I'm very much interested about the situation in Palestine. So a very strange situation happened a few days ago. The IDF military said they don't want to continue fighting with the Palestinians in Rafah, in Gaza, and they disobeyed the orders of Netanyahu. And
Right.
it is very strange. I mean, the world is outraged about this genocide. We cannot find another word that is happening in Palestine. The world is sick about this, and maybe there is a sign of lucidity in Israel, and maybe it was a coup d'état, or I don't know, something. We know
Well,
that in the beginning of last year there were huge protests against Netanyahu because he changed the laws that could affect him because he is in charge with a lot of corruption files, and he wanted to control the Supreme Court in Israel. And he is like a dictator in Israel. What do you think is going to happen there?
well, let's be clear that unlike the United States, and I'm not sure what the law is in Romania. In the United States, the president is the commander in chief. He is in charge of the armed forces under civilian control.
It's
In
the same in
Israel, the same Romania. Okay, good. In Israel, it's different. Their cabinet, not just Netanyahu, the whole cabinet is commander in chief. That's why Netanyahu set up that special war cabinet that had members of the opposition party like Benny Gantz in it. That war cabinet was dissolved a week ago, which means that authority, command authority over the military, transferred back to the whole cabinet. That includes these crazies like Itamar Ben Gavir, Bezalel Smotrich. I was struck by the fact that the IDF was saying, "Hey, we're not going to defeat Hamas. Hamas is an idea; it's not a concrete thing that we can defeat." And then you had Netanyahu come out, "Oh, that's not true. That's a lie. We're going to defeat Hamas." So clearly, you got a split between the political side and the military right now. I'd argue part of the reason the military is splitting away is because they're suffering casualties. And they've suffered more casualties than they thought they would in Gaza. They're fighting a guerrilla war. And when you blow up all these buildings and create all these piles of rubble, all you do is create hiding places for Hamas guerrilla fighters to pop up and blow up tanks and ambush Israeli citizens, Israeli soldiers. So, and several of us predicted this at the outset. We drew the parallels with Stalingrad. You know, when the German aircraft came in and pulverized the city, yeah, they knocked down all the buildings, but then they created actual physical obstacles that prevented the tanks from being able to move freely, and provided defensive emplacements for Soviet troops. Well, the same things happened with Hamas and the Israelis. Netanyahu is not popular, but his policies are. And that's why I think the West would be cautious to invest too much in, quote, getting. If we just get rid of Bibi Netanyahu, all the problems will be solved. No, they won't. The Israeli policy, which is the problem, is going to remain the same. And they have been promising now for 6 months, the Israeli military, that they're going to go into southern Lebanon, they're going to defeat Hezbollah. And I have friends who are in contact with senior officials in the Israeli Defense Force. And that's what those senior officials are telling my friends. They're going to attack in southern Lebanon. So this war there in Israel is going to expand. And once it expands to Hezbollah, we're going to be in whole new territory. Hezbollah has 100 times the military capability of Hamas. It has more soldiers, trained soldiers, more equipment, better gun emplacements, rockets, more missiles. It has everything more. And it's combat trained. They spent the last 12 years fighting in Syria on behalf of the Syrian government against the ISIS fighters and Western-backed rebels. And then prior to that, they fought the Israelis to a standstill in 2006. So you're looking at a very, very dangerous time. You know, this, as we talked about earlier, it's one thing talking about the Ukraine and the perils that exist there, but now it's compounded with what's going on in Israel. I think that has the chance to expand to a far larger war for anything in Ukraine.
Yes, it's interesting, Mr. Johnson, that there are many statements saying that actually Netanyahu supported Hamas. He financed this organization. And I'm going to ask our colleague on technical team to put some links. And it's a public news that Netanyahu gave a lot of money to Hamas in order to make an opponent to pay LO from Western Bank to not have a Palestinian state.
Right.
It was a strategy. Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. I mean, it was Hamas Hamas was not created by Israel. Hamas was an organic movement, and it developed and incorporated itself. However, once it came into existence, then the Israelis and Israeli intelligence in particular decided that they would target Hamas, provide them with money in order to create a balance, something to offset Fatah and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And that was very cynical on their part, because you summarized it precisely. Israel wanted to make sure they had an excuse not to enter into a peace agreement with the Palestinians, and using Hamas became an excuse for not having to do that.
Yes. Okay, so Israel is, on the other hand, prepared to attack Lebanon because Hezbollah is supporting Palestinians, and it seems that Israel will not allow this, and with their well-known method, they want to attack Lebanon to stop this help. What do you think is going to happen?
If Israel does that, Israel will commit suicide, in my view. Israel's first move was to try to convince the government of Lebanon to take on Hezbollah, and that's the army of Lebanon's not a match for the Hezbollah military force. Hezbollah is, really the de facto government of Lebanon. Israel may very well, there's been some speculation, I know, by retired Colonel Doug McGregor, that Israel could use a tactical nuclear weapon or two in southern Lebanon to target and try to destroy Hezbollah headquarters and, logistics sites. If Israel does that, I think they will have crossed another red line. They could widen this war to bring in countries like Pakistan, Turkey, as well as Iran, possibly Jordan and Iraq. I mean, this would be viewed as unconscionable. If they go in conventionally, Israel's going to get beat because Hezbollah has a tunnel network system far more extensive and better developed than anything that Hamas has, and they've been working on this now for the last almost 17 years in the aftermath of the war in 2006. So this is, part of the problem you've got here is what I call Israeli hubris. The Israelis believe that they're the best, that their nobody's better than them, and that they're more powerful, and that these Hezbollah fighters are a bunch of raghead wearing knuckleheads that have no capability. When you make those kinds of assumptions, you set yourself up for failure. So, but it does appear Russia, the Israelis are hell bent on going into southern Lebanon. They've said it repeatedly over and over and over. It's just a matter of when. I think they'll do anything until after Netanyahu visits Washington, D.C.
Yes, we see on the screen some articles, even from Israel, that they acknowledge that Israel supported Hamas. I'm going to ask my colleague to put the other articles, just the title, because we have no time to insist on this topic.
Sure.
Okay, no problem. People, they saw that I did not invent this information.
Yeah, you're not making it up. I can vouch for that.
Absolutely. We saw that on many universities in the world, in the United States, in Europe, students protested against this genocide in Palestine, and they were arrested because the system does not allow to say anything against Israel, is labeled as anti-Semitism very fast.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
the United States is under the full control of the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and other organizations.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I know. Every congressman is controlled by a member of AIPAC, of this powerful lobby, and they cannot move without the approval of this Israeli organization.
Yeah, they come with the promise of money, and most members of Congress are fearful to alienate others who have lots of money.
I appreciate very much Professor John Mersheimer in the United States, that even he is so well known, he had this courage to write books on this topic and to show how Israel takes so much monies from United States. In my knowledge, Israel is receiving $3 or $5 billion each year for nothing. I mean, even Israel is such a powerful country, Palestinians are not. but Israel
Right.
is receiving monies from United States, and Palestinians who lives in poverty and shortage, they have no water, no food, no electricity, nothing. They don't receive anything from United States. So it's very weird on the first sight. Okay, let's
Right.
move to the situation in South China Sea. Even today, I saw some news that the tensions are growing. They started to attack some ships. I saw a news something today that the Chinese fleet invade the Philippines area, and United States responded with missiles of 400 kilometers range, and they launched this kind of rockets. I don't know. The situation is very tense there. Is on the break point to go on a larger war.
Right. Well,
What do you think is going to happen?
when you talked about the neocons earlier, there's actually a division between the neoconservatives about the way forward on the national security front. There are those who argue that we got to confront Russia. Russia's the threat. We need to deal with that. Back up Ukraine at all costs. But then there's, I think, a larger crowd who insists that Russia's a side story. The real enemy, the main event, is China. And they're openly talking about going to war with China. And you know, I don't want to argue that the Chinese are somehow an innocent society that has not engaged with, criminal activity. I mean, clearly the Chinese have had, at least elements in Chinese society, have had clear direct relationships with the drug cartels, Colombia and Mexico. I know firsthand of a major Chinese aluminum manufacturer that diverted his product through Mexico and collaborated with the Knights Templar, another drug organization. So I'm not trying to say that that China is necessarily a benign force on the foreign policy front, but China is not an expeditionary imperial power bent on conquering the world, and yet that's the narrative the West is pushing in order to justify Western imperial ambitions against China, which is why we're busy trying to round up Vietnam and the Philippines, Malaysia and Indonesia and Japan and South Korea to surround China, to quote, contain China. And yet, if we flip the script, and that if China was doing in the Caribbean what the United States claims that, or what we're doing to thwart the Chinese actions around its own territory, we would view that as an act of war, and we would be ready to fight for it. The other thing in all of this is the United States has lied, it's abandoned, it's broken its promise to the Chinese. 53 years ago now, when Richard Nixon walked off a plane in Beijing, and then which led to the discussions and acceptance of the One China policy, in which the United States agreed that Taiwan was no longer a separate entity, but that it was part of China. And so that had been U.S. policy up until, I think, about 2 years ago. And then all of a sudden you get all of these different Republicans and Democrats insisting about Taiwanese independence. And you're the Chinese, you're sitting there watching this going, these Americans are crazy. And then you've got the number 2 guy in the U.S. military command that's responsible for China. It's called Indo-PACOM, talking openly about going to war with China in 2025. I mean, for God's sake, if you're a Chinese intelligence officer or senior military officer, you've got to hear that from the United States and say, all right, we got to get ready. They're going to go to war with us. They're going to attack us. So that's, I mean, it's just, this is entirely unprovoked. And it's a reminder of the United States trying to insist that it has influence and control over parts of the world where it really has no right to be there.
Yes, indeed. I propose as a final subject for today to speak about United States. We see that Joe Biden is more and more, I don't know what kind of word to use. He seems to
Unpopular.
be a puppet.
Yeah.
To be unpopular and a puppet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obvious for many of us that he does not take any decision. He does not know which is left and which is right, when he have to talk, when he have to sit. We had this G7 summit a few days ago, and he was like he did not know where he is. And
Yeah.
we see here that doctors demand Biden take dementia tests now, after an astonishing week of gaffes kept off by brutal DOJ probe that found president suffers significant limitations in memory. And this is a very diplomatic formula, but actually he is a shame. I mean,
Mhm.
how I don't know how the population in United States can pretend that this is something normal. Biden should be the most powerful man in the United States,
Right.
and what is happening with Biden? The deep state did not have any other puppet to put in front.
Uh, the, the real question boils down to who's controlling things. Because and that's um, openly we would point to, well, Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken appear to be the ones running things along with the Biden chief staff. But the question is who's behind him. So we know Sullivan has very close ties with Clinton, as well as with Obama. So there's always a possibility that you've got the influence of Obama and the Clintons coming in behind. But it's a legitimate concern. You as well as I do, there are a lot of things foreign leaders won't say openly and in public, but behind the scenes are going, "Good God, did you see Biden? He's lost. He doesn't know where the hell he is. He's not even sure what meeting this is." And that's dangerous. I mean, this is a guy that can order nuclear strikes. So, I think the conventional wisdom in this side of the Atlantic is sometime before the Democratic National Convention. I guess it's in August. Biden will resign, and they will come up with a replacement for him at that convention.
And who is going to come instead of him? I mean, you are
That
going to
is
have elections in November.
now the names that keep surfacing are Michelle Obama, Gavin Newsom. What's really fascinating,
Clinton.
nobody wants. Clinton's been mentioned, but I think they recognize she's still too toxic. And then Kamala Harris, boy, she's nowhere on the list. They're trying to throw her overboard, and I think they're making a mistake there because I think she's going to fight like hell to hang on. In fact, if Biden does resign, or if, let's say something medically happens to him, which is, I would say above 50% that happened, he becomes president. And as acting president, she's not gonna let go of that. Not in the least. So this, what we're looking at for this, if I'm a foreigner looking at the United States, so the United States is going through a period of great chaos. It's not going to be orderly. It's not going to be controlled. It's going to be pretty chaotic. We'll look a little bit like what was going on in Kenya today with people attacking Parliament, people getting killed. I think we're in for a fall that's going to look like that as opposed to peaceful election.
I saw a news that Biden signed an order to accord citizenship to 500,000 immigrants that entered on the southern border. So, do you think this can influence the elections in November?
Oh, absolutely. That's why they're going to call it Biden's part of his re-election campaign strategy. Register as many illegal migrants as possible and they can vote without getting caught.
And what about Trump? You think Trump is a better president for the United States? I mean, most of the people in Romania they appreciate Donald Trump because he made no war during his mandate. He said he will stop this conflict in Ukraine. And another aspect regarding Trump, he is backing very much Israel. In Romania, we are aware that Palestine is in a very hard situation. I mean, they have no means to defend themselves, and thousands of, I think, 40,000 Palestinians have been killed. How could Donald Trump support Israel in this situation?
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is the idea of Trump as president is just superior and better than Joe Biden. If for no other reason, he's just mentally more coherent. But you raise a lot of very valid points that it depends on which Donald Trump we're talking about. The Donald Trump that's the populist, that's in touch with people's, the average person, what they're facing with inflation and not able to make ends meet, that Donald Trump resonates as very popular. We go back to the Donald Trump when he was president, who had some of the most atrocious hires of people, putting people in positions of power and influence that had no business serving, and that he was very much a captive of people like Chris Christie and others. So he made some real terrible mistakes in personnel. If he's learned from that and knows has a better idea of who to hire and what kind of people to look for, then his presidency will be different and better. He is, I think, tends to be anti-war, and will therefore do everything he can to diffuse tensions both with China and with Russia. Israel is his Achilles heel. His daughter's Jewish, and there's a lot of Jewish money flowing out of Sheldon Adelson reportedly is offered to give him a substantial sum if he basically pledges to back Israel at any cost. What will make that interesting is if Israel goes ahead with this offensive against Hezbollah in the next week, 2 or 3 weeks, by the fall, Israel could be facing utter defeat, and it won't matter what Trump does when Trump's elected. Israel's fate will be sealed. So I think Trump offers a better chance of not having World War III.
Yes, I hope that patriots, Americans from United States, like General Michael Flynn, as I know, and some others. I had many shows with patriots in United States. Scotty Sachs, for instance, is a pretty well-known TV producer in the United States, and I hope that we will resist without World War until November, until most probably Donald Trump will come back at the White House. And if it's not going to happen, I mean, a world war, we in Romania, you in the United States, in Russia, and everywhere, we are going to live a normal life. And it is not very much time anymore. I mean, there are few months, but we see that the globalists are desperate to start a world war in Middle East, in Ukraine, in China, everywhere, because this seems to be their only way. Without a global war, they will be defeated because they are losing everywhere.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes, this is my opinion. Mr. Larry Johnson, it was a great honor for us to have you in the show. Thank you very much for your opinions. For us in Romania, is so significant that you, an American, have the courage to tell the truth. Even this truth is sometimes embarrassing for United States, but we know we make the difference. It is not embarrassing for the citizens. It is accusing for the deep state, for military industrial complex.
Dr. Atudorei, I thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to be with you.
I hope we will see again. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
please.
And God bless you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. And same to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.